My name is Reed, and at 68 years old, I never thought I would be called a freeloader in the house I paid off 20 years ago. When my son Jack lost his job, I welcomed him and his wife Lisa to live with me. I thought I was helping family through tough times, but 6 months later, I found myself cornered in my own kitchen, with Lisa screaming at me to pay rent or sleep on the street. I said nothing that night, but by morning, everything changed. If you enjoy stories about standing up for yourself, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of life storytellers. 5 years ago, my wife Martha passed away after 43 years of marriage. The silence in our 3-bedroom colonial house was deafening at first. Every morning, I expected to hear her humming in the kitchen or the gentle click of her knitting needles in the living room. The house we had purchased 30 years ago felt too big, too empty without her laughter filling the rooms. My son Jack was 39 years old and worked as a project manager for a tech company in the city. He had married Lisa 7 years earlier in what Martha had called the wedding of the century for our modest family. Lisa was 34, worked in marketing, and had always struck me as ambitious and image-conscious. Their relationship seemed happy enough, though Martha had occasionally mentioned that Lisa appeared to be the one steering their ship. Jack and I had always been close, though like any father and son, we had our moments of tension. He inherited my stubbornness but got his mother's compassion. After Martha died, Jack made an effort to visit weekly, sometimes bringing dinner or helping me with yard work. Those moments meant the world to me. Though I noticed his visits became less frequent after the first year, I understood. Life moves forward. The house meant everything to me. Martha and I had saved for 10 years to afford the down payment, working extra shifts and foregoing vacations. I worked as an electrical engineer at the local manufacturing plant, putting in overtime whenever it was available. Martha taught 3rd grade at the elementary school and tutored kids after hours to earn extra money. We'd celebrated with cheap champagne the day we signed the mortgage papers, and again 20 years later when we made the final payment. This house represented our life's work and held every important memory. Jack and Lisa lived in an upscale apartment downtown, paying rent that made me wince whenever I heard the amount. $2,300 a month for what Lisa called location and lifestyle. Jack seemed content with the arrangement, though I occasionally noticed tension when bills were discussed. Then the tech bubble in our city began to burst. Companies started laying off employees in waves. Jack called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice tight with shock. His entire department had been eliminated, 23 people gone in one afternoon, including him. His severance package would cover 3 months, but the job market was flooded with similar professionals all competing for the few remaining positions. "I don't know what we're going to do, Dad," he said, the worry in his voice making him sound like the 8-year-old boy who'd come to me after breaking a neighbor's window. "Our lease is up for renewal next month, and they're raising the rent again." Without hesitation, I offered what seemed the obvious solution. "Come stay with me. The house has plenty of room, and you can save money while you job hunt." There was a pause, and I heard murmuring in the background. Lisa's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. "Are you sure, Dad?" "It would only be temporary," Jack said. "Absolutely. This house is too big for just me anyway." 2 weeks later, they arrived with a moving truck. I had cleared out the spare bedroom that had once been Jack's room and the small office where Martha used to grade papers. I wanted them to have their own space, to feel comfortable. The first few weeks were genuinely pleasant. The house felt alive again with conversation and movement. Jack cooked dinner most nights, recreating some of Martha's recipes that I had been too melancholy to attempt. Lisa kept the place tidier than I had in years. We fell into a comfortable routine, and I enjoyed having family around the breakfast table again. Lisa brought a designer's eye to the house. Initially, her suggestions were thoughtful. This couch would get less sun damage if we moved it to the other wall. Or, would you mind if I organized the kitchen cabinets? I think it would be more efficient. I appreciated her efforts to improve our shared living space, but soon I began noticing subtle shifts. My favorite reading chair disappeared from the living room one day. replaced by a sleek armchair I couldn't seem to get comfortable in. When I asked about it, Lisa explained that my old chair had been an eyesore, and this new one tied the room together. The family photos that had lined the hallway were taken down and replaced with abstract prints that meant nothing to me. Jack seemed oblivious to these changes, or perhaps unwilling to address them. When I mentioned missing my chair, he shrugged and said, "Lisa has a good eye for these things, Dad. The place looks more modern now." I tried to be understanding. They were younger, with different tastes, and this arrangement was temporary after all. I could endure some redecorating if it helped Jack get back on his feet. But sometimes, sitting in that uncomfortable new chair, looking at walls that no longer held the faces of people I loved, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The first 3 months passed with relative peace. Jack spent his days sending out resumes and networking with former colleagues. Lisa continued working remotely for her marketing firm, setting up an elaborate workspace in the converted office. I tried to maintain my routines while giving them space to establish theirs. In the 4th month, Jack landed a new position at a smaller company. The relief was visible on his face when he told me, though he admitted the salary was nearly 30% less than his previous job. "It's a foot in the door," he explained. "Once I prove myself, there's room for advancement." I was proud of him for persevering and finding something so quickly in a difficult market. Lisa's reaction was more measured. "It's something," she said with a tight smile, "but we'll need to adjust our expectations." I assumed this meant they would stay a bit longer to build up savings before moving out. I was surprised to find I didn't mind the idea. Despite the occasional friction, having Jack around had eased the loneliness that had settled in after Martha's passing. As Jack adjusted to his new work schedule, Lisa's presence in the house expanded. One afternoon, I returned from grocery shopping to find my den completely rearranged. My bookshelf had been pushed into a corner to make room for an exercise bike, and my desk had been replaced with a smaller one. "We needed a workout space," Lisa explained when I asked about the changes. "And that old desk was so bulky. This one works just as well, doesn't it?" It didn't. The new desk had no drawers for my papers and was too small for the crossword puzzles I enjoyed doing. But I swallowed my objections. It was just furniture, after all. But the changes continued. The kitchen cabinets were reorganized to the point where I couldn't find anything without asking. The garage, where I had kept my workbench and tools meticulously arranged for decades, was transformed into a storage space for Lisa's extensive collection of seasonal decorations and clothing. When I gently raised concerns about these changes, the conversations became increasingly strained. "We're just trying to maximize the space," Lisa would say, a hint of irritation creeping into her voice. "This house has so much potential if it's properly utilized." It was as if the house I had lived in for 30 years was suddenly inadequate until she improved it. Each week, I found myself retreating to smaller and smaller portions of my own home. My bedroom became my sanctuary, the one place that remained untouched by Lisa's renovations. The dynamics at mealtimes shifted as well. When they first moved in, we had eaten together most evenings, sharing stories and enjoying the company. Gradually, Lisa began scheduling their dinner later and later. After I had already eaten, Jack would apologize, saying Lisa preferred eating later due to her work schedule, but I suspected she simply preferred not to dine with me. Jack changed too. My son, who had always made time for our conversations about everything from baseball to politics, became evasive and distracted. When we did talk, Lisa often hovered nearby, interjecting or steering the conversation in different directions. The private father-son moments became increasingly rare. 6 months into their stay, Lisa began hosting dinner parties for her friends and colleagues. These elaborate affairs featured catered food and expensive wine, surprising given their supposed financial constraints. More surprising was that I was never invited to join. Instead, Lisa would knock on my bedroom door earlier in the day to inform me they would be using the main areas of the house that evening, her phrasing making it clear that my presence wasn't welcome. On one such evening, my old friend Thomas came by unexpectedly. We had planned to meet at the local diner, but he had gotten the days mixed up. When he rang the doorbell, Lisa answered, wearing a cocktail dress and holding a wine glass. "Mr. Matthews isn't available right now," I heard her say through the cracked door. "We're having a private gathering. Perhaps you could come back another time." I had been reading in my room and heard the exchange. Rushing downstairs, I called out, "Thomas, come on in. I didn't realize you were stopping by today." Lisa's smile tightened as she was forced to open the door. Thomas entered, visibly uncomfortable as he took in the scene of well-dressed people mingling in the living room. "Sorry to intrude," Thomas said. "I thought we were meeting tonight." "It's tomorrow," I clarified. "But since you're here, let me grab my jacket and we can head out for that coffee." As I retrieved my coat, I overheard Lisa explaining to one of her friends in a hushed but audible tone, "That's Jack's father. He's still adjusting to having people in the house. It's been difficult integrating him into our lifestyle." Her words stopped me cold. Integrating me? This was my house, my life they had entered, not the other way around. Yet somehow, in just 6 months, Lisa had managed to reframe the entire situation. Thomas noticed my expression as we left. In the safety of his car, he asked, "Reed, what's really going on over there?" I sighed, unsure how to explain how quickly and completely I'd been marginalized in my own home. "It's complicated," was all I could manage at the time. But Thomas's question lingered in my mind long after our coffee. What was going on? And more importantly, how had I allowed it to happen? By the 6-month mark of Jack and Lisa's residency, the atmosphere in the house had become undeniably tense. What had started as subtle changes had evolved into a complete takeover. I found myself feeling like an unwelcome guest, tiptoeing around the home I had owned for 3 decades. Every morning, I would wake early, make my coffee, and retreat to my bedroom before Lisa emerged. I had learned that encountering her in the kitchen often led to pointed comments about the noise I made or how I left things. It was easier to avoid the interaction altogether. The rare times when Lisa's friends visited during daylight hours, she would introduce me with barely concealed annoyance. "This is Jack's father. He's still living here," she would say, as if I were an inconvenient house guest who had overstayed my welcome. The awkward smiles and pitying glances from her friends made my stomach twist with humiliation. One particular incident stands out in my memory. Lisa had invited a couple for Sunday brunch. As I passed through the dining room to get to the back door for my morning walk, she called out, "Reed, would you mind using the side door? We're having an important discussion here." The side door required walking through the garage, which was now so cluttered with their belongings that navigating it was a hazard. But rather than create a scene, I changed direction. Her friend, appearing embarrassed by the exchange, said, "Oh, don't change your routine on our account." Lisa laughed lightly. "It's just that Reed tends to hover and listen in. We've had to establish some boundaries." I had never eavesdropped on her conversations, and the unfair characterizations stung. I left without responding, my face burning with a mixture of anger and shame. Meanwhile, Jack's career at the new company was beginning to take off. 8 months after starting, he received a promotion to team lead. While his salary still didn't match his previous position, the gap was narrowing. I was genuinely happy for him and tried to celebrate the achievement with a special dinner, but Lisa intervened. "We've already made reservations with friends," she informed me. "Industry connections. Very important for Jack's career trajectory." Jack looked apologetic but didn't contradict her. "Maybe we can celebrate this weekend, Dad." The weekend came and went without mention of the dinner. It was becoming a pattern. One Tuesday afternoon, Lisa approached me while I was reading the newspaper in what remained of my space in the living room. "Jack and I have been talking," she began, sitting across from me with what I recognized as her business negotiation posture. "We think it's time to make some real improvements to the house." "Improvements?" I echoed, setting down my paper. "Yes. The kitchen is hopelessly outdated, and the master bathroom needs a complete overhaul. We're thinking of converting the attic into a proper office space as well." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. These weren't small cosmetic changes, but major renovations that would cost tens of thousands of dollars. "Lisa, this house doesn't need those kinds of renovations. Everything functions perfectly well." She sighed as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "Reed, This isn't about basic functionality. It's about modernizing the space to reflect our lifestyle and increase the home's value. The home's value isn't a concern for me, I replied carefully. I don't plan on selling. Plans change, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And really, don't you think it's time this place entered the 21st century? Before I could respond, she continued. We'll handle all the details, of course. You won't need to worry about a thing. That evening, I overheard them discussing contractors and financing options. Jack mentioned concerns about the cost, but Lisa dismissed them. We're living here now, she said. We might as well make it work for us. The "we're living here now" struck me as particularly telling. There was no acknowledgement of the temporary nature of their stay, no mention of eventually finding their own place. In Lisa's mind, it seemed, they had already claimed ownership. The following week, I discovered something that turned my unease into alarm. While looking for a photo album in the hall closet, I found a trash bag full of discarded items. Curiosity made me look inside, and my heart sank. There were several framed photos of Martha and me that had once adorned the walls, a handcrafted wooden box my father had made, and a collection of small ceramic figurines Martha had collected over the years. These weren't just decorative items. They were pieces of my history, tangible connections to people I had loved and lost, and Lisa had thrown them away like common trash. Confronting her was one of the hardest things I'd done since Martha's death. I found my things in the garbage, I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger pulsing through me. Lisa barely looked up from her laptop. I cleared out some clutter from the living spaces. Those old trinkets were gathering dust. Those trinkets are my memories, I said. You had no right to touch them, let alone throw them away. This got Jack's attention. He looked up from his phone, glancing between us with evident discomfort. Dad, I'm sure Lisa didn't realize those things were important, he said, automatically taking her side. They're photographs of your mother, Jack. How could they not be important? Lisa closed her laptop with a snap. Look, I was trying to create a more cohesive aesthetic. This place was like a museum to the past. It's not healthy to surround yourself with reminders of loss. That's not your decision to make, I replied. We're living here too now, Lisa countered. Don't we get a say in our environment? Jack placed a hand on her arm. Lisa, maybe we should have asked first. She pulled away from him. We can't tiptoe around his feelings about every little thing. He's being overly sensitive about my own possessions in my own home. The words came out sharper than I intended. Lisa's expression hardened. Is that what this is? A reminder that this is your house, so you get to make all the rules? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. She stood up. Come on, Jack. I need some air. Jack hesitated, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. For a moment, I thought he might stay, might finally acknowledge the unfairness of the situation. Instead, he followed Lisa out of the room. Later that evening, I called Thomas. After recounting the incident, I admitted the truth I'd been avoiding. I think I'm losing my place in my own home, Thomas. And worse, I think I'm losing my son. Thomas was quiet for a moment before responding. Reed, you need to establish some boundaries. This is still your house. You don't have to let them push you out of it. His words made sense, but implementing them felt overwhelming. Confrontation had never been my strong suit, and the fear of further alienating Jack paralyzed me. I don't know how to fix this without making everything worse, I confessed. Sometimes things have to get worse before they can get better, Thomas replied. But whatever you decide, remember that you deserve respect in your own home. After hanging up, I sat in the dark of my bedroom, surrounded by the few possessions Lisa hadn't managed to declutter. Thomas was right. I needed to stand up for myself. I just wasn't sure I had the strength to face what might come next. Winter arrived with unusual bitterness that year. Perhaps it was fitting that the coldest weeks brought the fever that sent me to the hospital. What started as a persistent cough rapidly deteriorated into pneumonia, my 68-year-old lungs struggling against the infection. I spent 7 days in the hospital. The fluorescent lights and beeping machines, a stark contrast to the quiet darkness I had grown accustomed to in my bedroom retreat. Jack visited daily, bringing books and newspapers, sitting with me for an hour or two between work and returning home. Lisa never appeared, always sending her regrets through Jack with various excuses about work deadlines or prior commitments. "She sends her love," Jack would say, but the words rang hollow. On the 7th day, the doctor discharged me with prescriptions for antibiotics and strict instructions for rest. Jack came to drive me home, helping me navigate the icy walkway to the front door. "We've made a few changes while you were away," he mentioned casually as he turned the key. "Just some rearranging to make things more comfortable for you." The moment I stepped inside, I knew a few changes was a severe understatement. The living room had been completely reorganized, with several pieces of my furniture nowhere to be seen. But that wasn't what stopped me in my tracks. "Where are my things?" I asked, looking around at the emptied hallway where I'd kept a small table with my keys and wallet. "We thought it would be better if you had everything in one place," Jack explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Less walking around for you while you recover." He led me upstairs, but instead of turning toward my bedroom, he guided me toward the smallest room in the house, one we had used for storage. "We thought this would be more manageable for you," he said, opening the door to reveal a single bed, a small dresser, and a nightstand crowded into the tight space. A few boxes of my clothing and personal items sat stacked in the corner. "Where are my things?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "We moved everything in here," Jack replied. "Your essential stuff anyway." "And my bedroom? The master bedroom?" Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Lisa thought it would be good to convert it into a home gym. With you being sick, she figured exercise equipment would help us all stay healthy, and this room is closer to the bathroom." I stood silently, taking in the implications of what had happened. While I lay in a hospital bed fighting pneumonia, they had seized the opportunity to claim the last remaining space that was truly mine. "Where's my bed?" I asked. "My dresser?" "We put some things in storage," Jack admitted. "That big furniture wouldn't fit in here, and we needed to make room for the exercise equipment. The bed Martha and I had shared for decades. The dresser that held the small mementos of our life together, relegated to storage without my knowledge or consent." I felt lightheaded suddenly, and Jack guided me to sit on the narrow single bed. "I know it's a bit of an adjustment," he said, his tone suggesting I was overreacting. "But Lisa put a lot of thought into making this work. She even got you a new TV." He pointed to a small screen mounted on the wall. I said nothing, too overwhelmed to form a response that wouldn't result in words I might regret. "Let me get you some water and your medication," Jack said, clearly relieved to escape the uncomfortable silence. Alone in the tiny room, surrounded by boxes containing the remnants of my life, I felt a profound sense of loss. This wasn't just about furniture or space. It was about dignity and respect, both of which had been stripped away one small decision at a time. That evening, I attempted to talk with Jack alone, but he was perpetually busy or distracted. When I knocked on their bedroom door, Lisa answered instead. "Jack's on a work call," she said, blocking the entrance with her body. "Is there something I can help you with?" "I'd like to speak with my son," I replied simply. "He's really very busy," she insisted. "Maybe tomorrow." Tomorrow came, and Jack left early for work. The pattern repeated the next day, and the next. It became clear he was avoiding a one-on-one conversation. On the 4th night after my return from the hospital, I couldn't sleep. The unfamiliar bed, the cramped room, and the lingering cough kept me awake. Around midnight, I went downstairs for tea, moving quietly through the dark house. As I waited for the kettle, I heard voices from the living room. Jack and Lisa were still up, their hushed tones carrying in the quiet house. "We need to discuss a more permanent solution," Lisa was saying. "We can't keep tiptoeing around like this." "He's still recovering," Jack replied. "We should wait until he's stronger. And then what? He's never going to willingly give up control of this house. You've seen how he reacts to even small changes." There was a pause before Lisa continued, her voice dropping even lower. "We need to figure out how to get the old man out of the house." My hand froze midway to the cabinet. I hadn't misheard. She was actively plotting to remove me from my own home. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Jack asked. His tone wasn't outraged or defensive. If anything, he sounded curious. "We make it uncomfortable for him to stay," Lisa explained. "Start charging him rent." "Rent? For his own house?" There was hesitation in Jack's voice, but not outright rejection of the idea. "If he's going to act like this is still all his, then he should contribute financially like anyone else would. We're covering all the bills, making improvements. Why shouldn't he pay his fair share? He might just refuse. Then he'll be the one being unreasonable, not us. And if he refuses long enough, maybe he'll decide it's easier to move into one of those senior apartments he gets brochures for." My chest tightened, and not from the pneumonia. My own son was discussing pushing me out of my home as if I were a problematic tenant rather than the owner who had generously opened my doors to them. "I don't know, Lisa," Jack said, but his protest sounded weak even to my ears. "Trust me," she insisted. "Once we get him out, we can finally make this place what it should be. No more outdated furniture, no more walking on eggshells. This location, with the right renovations, we could never afford a house like this otherwise." The kettle began to whistle, and I quickly removed it from the heat, but the damage was done. The conversation in the living room abruptly stopped. "Is someone in the kitchen?" Lisa asked. I didn't wait to hear more. Taking my tea, I retreated upstairs to my new, smaller room, closing the door quietly behind me. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I cradled the warm mug in my trembling hands. They wanted my house. Not temporarily, not as a gesture of family support during a difficult time, but permanently. And they were willing to manipulate and pressure me to get it. The next morning, I attempted once more to speak with Jack before he left for work. I intercepted him in the kitchen as he prepared coffee. "Jack, we need to talk," I said, my voice rough from both emotion and lingering illness. "Dad, I'm really running late," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Can it wait until tonight?" "It's important." "Tonight," he promised, already heading for the door. "We'll sit down after dinner." But that evening, when I came downstairs for the promised conversation, I found Lisa setting the table for dinner with elaborate place settings and candles. Jack had to work late, she informed me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He said to start without him. I looked at the table set for two and realized this had been planned. "I heard you last night," I said quietly. Lisa's smile faltered momentarily before returning, broader and more artificial. "Heard what?" "Your discussion about charging me rent, about wanting me out of my own house." Her expression hardened. "You were eavesdropping? In my own kitchen?" "Yes, I suppose I was." Lisa set down the plates with a sharp click. "Since you heard, then you know we have concerns about the financial arrangement here. Jack and I have been covering all the expenses while making improvements to the property. It seems only fair that you contribute." "Contribute to what exactly? Pushing me out of the home I own outright?" My voice remained calm despite the anger building inside me. "Don't be dramatic, Reed. We're talking about equitable distribution of household expenses. And as for ownership, well, Jack is your son. Surely you want to help secure his future." The implication was clear. She believed she was entitled to my home simply because she had married my son. "I'd like to discuss this when Jack is present," I said, turning to leave the room. Running away from difficult conversations as usual, Lisa called after me. "No wonder Jack feels he has to protect you from reality." Her words stung precisely because they targeted my greatest fear, that Jack saw me as a burden to be managed, rather than a father to be respected. That night, I lay awake thinking about Martha and what she would advise. She had always been the stronger one, more willing to confront uncomfortable situations directly. "Stand your ground," she would have said. "This is our home, the one we built together." With that thought echoing in my mind, I finally drifted into a restless sleep. The confrontation came 3 days later at dinner. Jack had actually come home at a reasonable hour, and Lisa had prepared an elaborate meal. The formality of the setting put me immediately on edge. "Dad, Lisa and I wanted to talk to you about something important." Jack began after we'd sat down. I nodded, noting how he deferred to Lisa with a glance. Lisa folded her hands on the table, adopting the same businesslike posture she'd used when discussing renovations. As you know, we've been covering all the household expenses since moving in, she began. Utilities, groceries, maintenance, plus the improvements we've been making. It's becoming a financial strain, especially with Jack's reduced salary. I understand, I said cautiously. I'm happy to contribute to the groceries and utilities. Lisa shook her head. That's not really what we had in mind. We think it would be more appropriate for you to pay rent. Despite having overheard their plans, hearing the words spoken directly to my face sent a wave of shock through me. Rent? For the house I own? The ownership situation is complicated, Lisa continued smoothly. Yes, your name is on the deed, but Jack has an interest in the property as your son and heir, and we're the ones maintaining and improving it now. There's nothing complicated about the ownership, I replied. The house is paid off. It belongs to me. Dad, Jack interjected, his voice taking on a placating tone that made me feel like a difficult child. We're just trying to be fair to everyone. We've taken over all the responsibilities, and we're investing in the property's future. Investing? You mean the changes you've made without my permission? Throwing away my belongings and moving me into a storage room while I was in the hospital? See, Lisa said to Jack, as if my response proved some point they'd discussed privately. This is exactly the attitude I was talking about. He doesn't appreciate anything we do. I appreciated being welcomed into my own home, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. I appreciated being moved from my bedroom without consent. I especially appreciated overhearing you plotting to push me out of my house. Jack at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Dad, nobody's pushing you out. We're just trying to establish a fair arrangement. Fair would have been discussing changes before making them. Fair would have been respecting that this is my home, not yours to renovate and rearrange as you please. Lisa's face flushed with anger. You're being completely unreasonable. We've been nothing but accommodating, putting up with your outdated furniture and your hoarding tendencies. Hoarding? I echoed in disbelief. You mean the mementos and photographs you threw away? This is exactly the problem, Lisa snapped, her composure cracking. You're stuck in the past, clutching at old things because you can't move forward. This house has potential, but you're letting it rot around you out of some misplaced sentimentality. Lisa, Jack said quietly, a warning in his tone, but she was too far gone now, her frustration spilling over. No, Jack, he needs to hear this. We've been walking on eggshells for months, and I'm tired of it. She turned back to me, her eyes hard. You're being selfish, Reed. This house is wasted on one person, especially someone who doesn't even have the resources to maintain it properly. I've maintained this house for 30 years, I replied, my own anger rising to meet hers. And now you can't, she shot back. You're an old man living on a fixed income. Without us, this place would fall apart around you. Jack placed a hand on her arm. Lisa, that's enough. She shook him off. No, it's time for some honesty. Either he starts paying rent like any other tenant would, or he needs to find somewhere else to live. We can't keep supporting him while he acts entitled to everything. The room fell silent. Jack looked between us, clearly torn. But what cut the deepest was that he didn't contradict her or defend me. Pay rent or sleep in the street. Lisa's voice rose to a shout as she stood, hands planted on the table. Those are your options. And honestly, you should be grateful we're giving you a choice at all. You're just a broke old man who can't take care of himself anymore. Her words hung in the air like poison. I looked at my son, waiting for him to say something, anything, to counter such a vicious attack. But Jack remained silent, his eyes fixed on his plate. In that moment, I understood with painful clarity that I had already lost him. Somewhere along the way, his loyalty had transferred completely to Lisa. Whether out of love or fear or simple conflict avoidance, he had chosen her side over mine, over decency itself. I stood slowly, my appetite gone. I think I'll turn in early tonight, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. That's it? You're just going to walk away instead of addressing the issue? Lisa called after me. I paused at the doorway but didn't turn around. There's nothing more to say tonight. Upstairs in my tiny room, I sat on the edge of the bed, Lisa's words echoing in my mind. A broke old man, incapable of taking care of himself, a burden to be managed or removed. Is that how they saw me? Is that how Jack saw me? The father who had worked overtime for years to provide for him, who had helped pay for his college education, who had welcomed him and his wife into my home when they needed help. I thought of Martha again, of how fiercely she would have defended our home, our memories, our dignity. I had been too passive, too afraid of conflict, too worried about maintaining peace at any cost. And that cost had become far too high. As I sat there in the dark, a strange calm settled over me. The hurt and anger remained, but beneath them rose something stronger: resolve. I was still the owner of this house. I had legal rights that no amount of manipulation could override, and it was time I remembered that. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Harold Winters, the attorney who had handled Martha's will and our estate planning. It was too late to call him tonight, but first thing in the morning, I would, because this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about standing up for myself and for the life Martha and I had built together. As I set my phone on the nightstand, I noticed a notification I'd missed earlier, a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. Curious, I played it back. Hello, this is Sarah Jenkins from First National Bank. I'm calling regarding the mortgage payments for property at 1342 Maple Street. We've noticed the account is now 60 days past due, and we need to speak with you urgently to discuss payment options before further action is taken. Please call us back at your earliest convenience. Mortgage payments? The house had been paid off for over 20 years. There was no mortgage, unless... A cold feeling swept through me as pieces began falling into place. The renovation plans, Lisa's confidence about ownership being complicated, their sudden interest in my financial contribution. Had they taken out a loan against my house? It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was mounting. And if they had, if they'd somehow encumbered my property without my knowledge, then this situation was far more serious than I had realized. With trembling fingers, I set an alarm for 7 a.m., determined to get answers as soon as the bank opened. Whatever was happening, whatever they had done, I would find out, and then I would act. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, dressed quickly, and slipped out of the house before Jack and Lisa stirred. The early spring air was crisp as I walked the 6 blocks to the bus stop, my mind focused on the day's mission. Harold Winters's law office opened at 8:30, and I was his first appointment of the day. The receptionist's surprised expression when I requested an urgent meeting told me I looked as determined as I felt. Harold had aged since I'd last seen him, his hair now completely white, but his sharp intelligence remained unchanged. After the initial pleasantries, I explained the situation in detail, from Jack and Lisa moving in to the confrontation the previous night. When I mentioned the voicemail about mortgage payments, his expression darkened. "Do you still have the voicemail?" he asked. I nodded and played it for him. He listened carefully, making notes. "This is concerning, Reed. If they've taken out a mortgage on your property without your consent, that's fraud. But let's not jump to conclusions. We need to verify exactly what's happening." Over the next 2 hours, Harold made a series of phone calls. First to the bank that had left the message, then to the county recorder's office to check for recent filings against my property. What we discovered left me cold with anger and disappointment. 6 weeks earlier, a home equity line of credit had been opened against my house for $150,000. The paperwork included what appeared to be my signature, though I had never signed such documents. "This is forgery," Harold stated flatly. "The question is whether Jack was involved or if Lisa did this on her own." The thought that my own son might have participated in such deception was almost unbearable. But given his behavior lately, I couldn't dismiss the possibility. "What can we do?" I asked. "Several things," Harold replied. "First, we'll file a fraud report with the bank and the police. Second, we'll send a cease and desist letter regarding any renovations or changes to the property. Third, We need to protect you from further exploitation. By noon, Harold had set everything in motion. We had reported the suspected fraud to the bank's security department, who put an immediate freeze on the credit line. Harold had also drafted a formal notice requiring Jack and Lisa to vacate the property within 30 days. "Are you sure you want to take such a definitive step?" he asked before finalizing the document. "This will likely end your relationship with your son, at least temporarily." I thought about it carefully. "The relationship is already damaged beyond recognition," I said finally. "And if he was part of this deception, then he's not the son I raised." Harold nodded solemnly. "I understand. But brace yourself for significant pushback. People rarely respond well when their schemes are uncovered." As I left his office, my phone rang. It was Lisa, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Where are you?" "The bank just called about some kind of fraud alert on our credit line. They're saying all access has been frozen." "I'm aware," I replied calmly. "In fact, I'm the one who reported it." There was a moment of stunned silence before she exploded. "You did what? How dare you interfere in our financial matters?" "My house is not your financial matter, Lisa. It's my property, and I never authorized any loans against it." "This is ridiculous. Jack, pick up the other line," she shouted, her voice momentarily distant from the phone. "Your father has lost his mind." I heard the click as Jack joined the call. "Dad? What's going on?" "I received a call about missed mortgage payments on my house," I explained, keeping my voice steady. "The house that's been paid off for 20 years. When I investigated, I discovered someone had taken out a home equity loan with what appears to be my forged signature." "That's absurd," Lisa cut in. "We were authorized to make financial decisions." "By whom?" I asked. "Certainly not by me. Jack has power of attorney," she stated triumphantly. "He has every right to make financial arrangements for your benefit." This was news to me. I never signed a power of attorney. There was an uncomfortable pause before Jack spoke. "Dad, remember those estate planning documents we updated last fall? The ones Lisa's cousin notarized?" I did remember signing updated will documents, but nothing about a power of attorney. "Those were will updates, Jack. Nothing else." Another silence. This one longer and heavier. "Jack?" I prompted. "Did you add documents I didn't know about? Or did Lisa forge my signature on those too?" "Now you're being paranoid," Lisa snapped. "The power of attorney was included in the packet. If you didn't read everything before signing, that's hardly our fault." Whether or not that was true, I couldn't say with certainty, but Harold would be able to investigate. "Well, it doesn't matter now," I said. "I've revoked any powers of attorney that might exist, reported the loan as fraudulent, and contacted my attorney. You'll be receiving formal notice to vacate the property within 30 days. "You can't be serious," Lisa gasped. "Completely serious. I've tolerated the disrespect, the manipulation, and the gradual takeover of my home. But fraud crosses a line I can't ignore." "Dad," Jack's voice was pleading now, "let's talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding. The time for talking was before you remortgaged my house without my knowledge. Before you moved me into a storage room while I was hospitalized. Before your wife screamed at me to pay rent or sleep in the street." "I never said that," Lisa protested. "I have nothing more to say right now," I continued. "The bank will be investigating the fraud, and you'll be receiving the formal eviction notice by courier this afternoon. I suggest you start looking for a new place to live." I ended the call as Lisa was launching into another tirade. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control returning. When I arrived back at the house, their car was gone. I used my key to enter what had become an unfamiliar space. In the kitchen, cabinets stood open, items pulled out in haste. In the living room, Lisa's laptop and papers were gone from the desk. I climbed the stairs to what had once been my bedroom. The exercise equipment remained, but the closet doors stood open, clothing missing. They had clearly left in a hurry after my call. Moving through the house, I took stock of the changes they'd made, the spaces they'd claimed. It would take time to restore, to reclaim my home. Some things, like the photos and mementos Lisa had discarded, were irreplaceable. but the house itself could be mine again. As I stood in the hallway, my phone rang. It was Harold. "Reed, I've been looking into that power of attorney issue. There is one on file, dated last October. But here's the interesting part. The notary who supposedly witnessed it doesn't exist. At least, there's no record of a notary with that name in the state database. So it was forged," I said. A statement rather than a question, almost certainly, which means it's invalid, and any actions taken under it are unauthorized, including the loan, especially the loan. I've already informed the bank's fraud department. They're escalating the investigation and should be contacting Jack and Lisa directly. After hanging up, I sat heavily on the stairs, the weight of what was happening finally hitting me. My own son had either actively participated in defrauding me or had been so completely under Lisa's influence that he'd turned a blind eye to her actions. Either way, the betrayal cut deep. I was still sitting there when my phone rang again, this time showing Jack's number. I considered letting it go to voicemail but decided to answer. "Dad," Jack's voice was frantic. "The bank just called. They're saying the loan is fraudulent and demanding immediate repayment of the $40,000 already dispersed. We don't have that kind of money." "What was the money used for, Jack?" I asked quietly. "Home improvements," he said quickly. Too quickly. $40,000 worth? In a house you don't own? Try again. He hesitated. "Lisa had some credit card debt from before we were married, and we invested in some stocks she said would double quickly. And the renovation plans? The gym equipment? Those were coming next. Once the investments paid off." I closed my eyes, processing the layers of deception. "Where are you now?" "At a hotel. Lisa is. She's pretty upset, saying you've ruined everything." "I've ruined everything?" The irony was almost too much. "Dad, please. Can we talk about this? Figure something out? The bank is threatening legal action if we don't repay the money." Part of me wanted to help him, to shield my only child from the consequences of his actions as I had done when he was young. But I knew that would only perpetuate the problem. "This is between you, Lisa, and the bank now," I said finally. "I've reported the fraud, which was my legal obligation. What happens next is out of my hands. So you're just washing your hands of me, your own son?" The hurt in his voice was real, which made it all the more painful to hear. "No, Jack. You washed your hands of me when you allowed your wife to mistreat me in my own home, when you participated in fraud against me, when you chose her schemes over your own father's dignity. I never meant for any of this to happen," he said quietly, "but you let it happen. And now, we both have to live with the consequences." After ending the call, I walked through each room of the house, taking inventory of what remained and what had been changed. In the coming days, I would begin the process of reclaiming my space, removing the exercise equipment, retrieving my furniture from storage, and restoring what could be restored. It wouldn't be the same. Some things were lost forever, but it would be mine again, a home rather than a battleground. And in that moment, despite the heartbreak of losing my relationship with my son, I felt a profound sense of relief. I had finally stood up for myself, had honored Martha's memory and the home we had built together. That night, I slept in the guest room, the closest approximation to my former bedroom still available. And for the first time in months, I slept deeply and without fear. In the weeks that followed, I reclaimed my house one room at a time. Harold helped me navigate the legal aftermath of the fraudulent loan, which the bank eventually forgave after their investigation confirmed the forgery. Lisa and Jack faced potential criminal charges, though I declined to press them, not wanting to see my son in legal jeopardy despite everything. The hardest decision was putting the house on the market. After 30 years, the memories embedded in every corner made it difficult to let go. But with Jack and Lisa's betrayal, the home no longer felt like the sanctuary it once had. Each room echoed with recent hurts rather than distant joys. The real estate market in our area was strong, and the house sold within 2 weeks for significantly more than I had anticipated. The irony wasn't lost on me that Lisa had been right about one thing. The property had indeed increased in value over the years. With the proceeds, I purchased a comfortable 2-bedroom condominium in a community for active seniors, just 3 blocks from Thomas and several other longtime friends. The space was smaller but perfectly adequate for my needs, with none of the maintenance headaches of the old house. The first months were difficult. Despite the betrayal, I missed Jack and the relationship we once had. I would find myself reaching for the phone to share news or a memory, only to remember the chasm between us. Each time, the pain felt fresh again. Thomas and my other friends became my support system. We met regularly for coffee, card games, and occasional fishing trips. They listened without judgment when I needed to talk and distracted me when dwelling on the past became too heavy. "You did the right thing, Reed," Thomas told me one evening as we sat on my new balcony watching the sunset. "Standing up for yourself doesn't make you the bad guy, no matter how they try to spin it." 6 months after the confrontation, a letter arrived from Jack. It was handwritten, 5 pages of small, careful script. He explained that he and Lisa had separated shortly after the fraud was discovered. The stress of the financial consequences and the collapse of their scheme had revealed fundamental problems in their relationship. He was living in an apartment across town, working his way through the debt they'd accumulated. Most importantly, he apologized, not with excuses or justifications, but with genuine remorse for his role in what had happened. "I lost myself in her vision of what our life should be," he wrote. "Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as my father and started seeing you as an obstacle to the future Lisa wanted. I'll never forgive myself for that betrayal, and I don't expect you to forgive me either. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did, and I am truly, deeply sorry." I read the letter several times, emotions washing over me in waves. Anger, sadness, a hint of vindication, and beneath it all, a small flicker of hope. Not for an immediate reconciliation. The wound was still too fresh for that, but for the possibility that someday we might find a way back to some version of father and son. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took the letter to my next session with Dr. Hansen, the therapist I'd started seeing to process the trauma of what had happened. In the safety of her office, I worked through my complex feelings about Jack's apology. "Forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation," Dr. Hansen reminded me. "You can forgive him for your own peace without immediately re-establishing the relationship." Gradually, I built a new life for myself. I joined a community center where I taught basic electronics to teenagers, finding joy in passing on the skills from my engineering career. I volunteered at the local library, participated in a walking club, and even went on a few casual dates, though none developed into anything serious. When I finally felt ready, 3 months after receiving his letter, I invited Jack to meet for coffee at a neutral location. The man who arrived was noticeably changed from the son who had participated in my mistreatment. He had lost weight, and his eyes carried a weariness beyond his years. Our conversation was awkward at first, each of us carefully navigating the minefield of recent history. But as the minutes passed, we found our way to more honest communication. "I don't know if our relationship can ever be what it was," I told him truthfully. "Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild." "I know," he replied, looking down at his coffee. "I'm not asking for everything to go back to normal. I just want a chance to prove that I've changed, that I understand what I did wrong." We agreed to move forward cautiously. Monthly coffee meetings at first, gradually increasing in frequency as comfort and trust slowly rebuilt. It would never be the same, but perhaps it could be something new, something stronger for having been broken and deliberately repaired. As for Lisa, I heard through Jack that she had moved to another state to live with her sister. The bank had pursued legal action against her for the fraud, resulting in probation and mandatory repayment of the funds. Jack had taken responsibility for his portion of the debt as part of their divorce settlement. 1 year after selling the house, I found myself driving past the old neighborhood. The new owners had painted the exterior a cheerful blue, replacing the white that Martha and I had chosen decades earlier. The large oak tree in the front yard had been trimmed, and new landscaping brightened the approach. It looked like a different house entirely, which seemed fitting. I felt no regret as I drove away. The house had served its purpose in my life, providing shelter for my family during our years together. Now it was serving a new family, while I had found a different kind of peace. The most profound lesson I learned through this painful chapter was about the courage to value myself. For too long, I had prioritized peace over dignity, acceptance over respect. I had allowed my boundaries to be violated repeatedly out of fear of conflict and desire to maintain family harmony at any cost. What I finally understood was that true family does not require such sacrifice. Real love includes respect for autonomy and recognition of worth. By standing up for myself, I wasn't just protecting a house or financial assets. I was asserting my fundamental right to be treated with dignity. Even more importantly, I learned that it's never too late to reclaim your power. At 68, I had believed on some level that my role was to gradually diminish, to make myself smaller to accommodate younger generations. Lisa had exploited that belief, but the fault was partly mine for accepting the premise. Now, at 69, I find myself more engaged with life, more confident in my right to occupy space in the world than I had been in years. The painful experience of betrayal had ultimately led to a kind of liberation. Sometimes I still miss the old house, the memories it contained of Martha and our life together. But I've come to realize that those memories reside in me, not in wood and plaster. No one can take them away, just as no one can diminish my worth unless I allow it. If you're watching this and facing your own battle for dignity, remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish or wrong. It's necessary and right. Age doesn't diminish your value or your right to respect. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for others and yourself, is to draw a line and say no more. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family pressure? What gave you the courage to take that step? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect their dignity. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power and your peace.